I want to know if there's more information, if Bellular News has dug up anything behind the scenes about the whole Xbox thing, basically like Xbox is closing a lot of their studios. But I want to know if there's any more information. I'm curious.
Right now, in the heart of Redmond, Washington, a bit of a war is raging. Leadership at Xbox studios like Double Fine, Compulsion Games, and Ninja Theory are fighting for their studio's existence. And that's because right now they just look like lovely, juicy line items on Xbox's planned budget cuts. They want to make those cuts in favor of just funding more of the biggest, safest, most franchise-friendly games. And they're not the only studios who are a bit worried. Under new Xbox CEO Asha Sharma, a developer can quite literally reveal a big game in a showcase one week, and then the very next week be closed down. It's quite wild. Hundreds more people are expected to be laid off in the next week, and still more people are choosing to jump before they are pushed, including some notable leadership roles. It all means that Xbox's reset is here, and rather curiously, it just so happens to mean that Microsoft gets to start their next financial year with significantly fewer costs. It all started to go down with reports in social media of scared Xbox employees, but Kotaku broke the more concrete story first, and that is that Compulsion Games, the makers of We Happy Few and South of Midnight, were in Xbox's sights. Xbox leadership wanted to close the studio, but its management was in negotiations over what would happen next. Bloomberg then shed a light on those negotiations. They reached well beyond Compulsion, as we now know. Compulsion, Double Fine, who are of course the Psychonauts and Keeper studio, as well as Hellblade's Ninja Theory, are all in, quote, active negotiations to spin off as they try to thwart closure. Well, that's very much not all, because according to Bloomberg sources, other studios are in Xbox's crosshairs as well, and that only adds weight to the closure rumors that have been circling around Dishonored and Deathloop's are.
Wait, let me see. Really? So they're actually going to close for this one?
Kane Leon. In all of these cases, the expectation is essentially the same, though. Even if these studios can buy themselves out of Microsoft or be spun out, as, say, Toys for Bob was able to manage, they'd be unable to operate at their current scale. And that's because their recent games just have not made enough money over the long term. Staff at these studios are already told to start looking for new roles, and that's because the studios just could no longer promise them a future. The Verge's sources then spelled out a bit more of the detail.
Well, at the end of the day, their games didn't sell for jack shit, to be honest, I'm like, take a look at their most recent games. Take a look at the past 3 recent games that came out for the Psychonaut devs. It just didn't sold. Same thing for the South of Midnight. Apparently, rumor has it they only sold 500K. Like, that's how much they got in like return profit or so out of 100 million that that was invested into that game specifically. So,
here. Xbox made a decision on at least one of these studios, and that is Ninja Theory. It would be closed unless its leadership could find an external buyer. Now, of course, that's the very same Ninja Theory that last week announced their new game. And it seems...
Yeah, but the funny thing about it is that their last game did not sold very well. That's the problem. Their last game had a significant downgrade, and then from the first game in general. Plus, on top of that, the writer who was in the first game, they worked on it a little bit, but they left for the second game, But they worked on it a little bit, though.
Like it was a game, at least per my impression, that was kind of designed to counteract the
and that was the lead
criticisms
writer.
Of the past. The game they just announced seems to be more gameplay focused, but maybe
well,
that
now it's more
matter.
gameplay
None
focused.
of these studios, to be clear, were involved in making Xbox's biggest, most financially successful games. They are not making
also that's also another game too as well that was sold by them specifically. This game right here, we looked at the numbers too for that one, and it was definitely not that good. It didn't even crack 1,000 players on Steam.
Quote, industry-defining franchises that Xbox leadership specifically said they needed to fund better, and they said that in the memo that they put out to staff last week. You see, under the old leadership, things were a little bit different. These studios weren't really meant to be doing those big blockbusters. they were meant to be building out new IP, essentially riskier bets that could pay off in the long run. They were also, of course, winning awards here and there, Compulsion very much among the award winners. And together, they were at least giving Game Pass subscribers a brand new first-party Xbox game pretty much every quarter as the whole big pipeline of all those studios that Spencer & Co. acquired began to build up and finally start shipping content. So what they represented was potential, little sparks that could grow into something big. And here's the funny thing. I just said a bunch of words there, right? About the little sparks.
Well, to me, to be honest, if you look at it like on a business financial standpoint, it's like you see the writing on the wall, you know? It was either they were going to sink more money into them and burn more money, or they were going to close the studios.
Can grow into something big. And you may think, oh, that's just you being idealistic and woolly. Oh no, those are the words of Xbox's very own chief content officer, Matt Booty. He said them this year, and you know what? He's a man who doesn't come off great when you compare his current words and actions to his past words and actions. The very first interview that Asha Sharma and Matt Booty gave after taking over Xbox was to Windows Central. And in this interview, they talked up how important the studio portfolio was. And they specifically called out, well, those portfolio studios and their games as being essential things to what Xbox could offer players. We cannot lose the ability to have those places where little sparks can grow into something big. The creative environment that lets us take bets and creative risks has to be a part of Xbox's culture. We are committed. Our studio system is built for that. So this isn't some statement said under a old strategy from an old leader. This is literally what they said earlier this year. Now, of course, the studio system may have been built for February's Xbox, not June's Xbox. June's Xbox is clearly very different. And hell, it's clearly different from even last week's Xbox, judging by how they're, revealing games and then closing studios, including studios that are making the games they've just revealed. That does mean that Asha Sharma's reset is here. And now, quite clearly, Xbox is committing itself to a very different looking future. And it seems to be one that's entirely driven by Satya Nadella's demands, which wouldn't be a surprise. He is the CEO of Microsoft. Now, Asha Sharma would appear to be his hand-picked CEO at Xbox, and it seems to mean that he's now rather free to talk more openly about what he wants from the Xbox division. So, if you like Xbox, you better listen up. You may not be pleased, or maybe you might be pleased. Let's see. He was on New York Times' Hard Fork podcast last week, and what he's got to say about Xbox was refreshingly honest from a CEO. Here's the quote. "No one can accuse Microsoft of not having invested for the last 25 years, and now we have to turn this into a sustainable business that delivers what is fundamentally one of the best sources of entertainment. Still, the challenge we have is we've not been monetizing that entertainment. In fact, if anything, we've been subsidizing that entertainment. In fact, there's more monetization of Xbox games happening on YouTube than at Xbox." Well, Satya, what can I say? I'm happy to oblige. Now, Satya's sentiment is really the same thing that Asha said earlier last week, that Xbox doesn't make enough profit. And that is obviously a problem.
Well, yeah,
Business
of course.
does need to make profit, and they were
It's a business
floating
at the
in
end
and
of the
around,
day.
I believe,
Not a
something
charity.
like 3%, which is literally worse than bonds. Not good. And the upshot of that is Xbox costs too much money. Now, never mind that, say, Nadella and the C-suite have got plans to spend $190 billion in data centers and AI this year alone. No, never mind that, because Xbox must pull their own weight by making sure they're spending less and also making
Do you
sure
think she's gonna rule it with an iron fist or something, be strict or so, as in like, we might actually get actual good games coming out from that specific side of the console? It could be, to be frankly honest. If she is willing to gut these studios out for the cost and then actually like literally focus on the actual things themselves, I can definitely see a more brighter future for Xbox, in my personal opinion. Because like if she doesn't play around or anything like that, then we can definitely feel a little bit more comfortable on this situation. Because at the end of the day, those games didn't do very well. But yeah, only time will tell, to be frankly honest. But it does seem to be going into a positive limelight. And hopefully she'll be able to, shape up these studios to go into the right direction they need to. Because at the end of the day, you're making video games for gamers, not for the weird people on Twitter.
they're earning more. Now, we've already seen reports from the information that Microsoft's C-suite is looking at where Xbox fits within the wider company and whether that means spinning them off or selling them. And what that means is that these studio closures are just the beginning, and the wider impacts
Oh,
are actually already starting to show across the company, and it starts at the top. As flagged by the game
wait.
business, the head of Xbox Game Studios, Craig Duncan, has stepped down within 2 years of taking the job. Before that gig, he was an executive at Rare, and in this gig, his job was basically overseeing many of the different studios that are now in danger of closing.
I see. We'll have to see. She is basically fixing the mistakes of her former CEO buying too many studios. That's what I'm saying. I feel like this might be going into a good direction. Because I said this before, right, in the previous video. Like I said, I talked so much shit in the reason why, because I did not agree with the Young Yeah video. Because we saw the Young Yeah version of this, right? But like, but looking at this in general specifically, it's just kind of like, well, you know, Xbox is not making money, you know? The word people who aren't going to buy the games you make for them in the first place. Huh? What? Yeah, those people literally on Twitter are the ones are not gonna buy the game, you know? The gamers themselves, you know? Like I said this specifically, what moves Xbox units? Halo, Gears of War, Forza, you know? These are the main flagship games that basically moves the console at the end of the day for you to pick up a console to play these exclusives. You know? These other games specifically were not that big or made a big splash on that, so
He left at the same time as Xbox Game Studios Chief of Staff Louise O'Connor. Neither person said why they were leaving, but it's really not that hard to
that is
connect.
true, but it's their fault though that they decided to you know failure of the second game. You know, there were so many mistakes, like there were so many problems to begin with the second Senua Saga Blade 2, and that's why it became more actiony in this new one. I guess like the third one, I guess you can say, you know, but it's not really running the number 3 in it.
The dots. I mean, they both walked right before, and I mean right before, all this stuff kicked off. And I think we can all understand why they would resign, even if it is a sort of token gesture that wouldn't really change anything. Maybe it's the sort of thing that's just, done in principle. You see, there is an expectation that even if studios aren't being closed, that significant layoffs are.
Yeah, but my question is, right, if they cancel the Blade game, my question is, how much work was in it? And was there any internal struggles within it with when it comes to like to the creative aspect of it? And to see like if they met those, you know, because you got to meet stretch goals, right, of development. So when like you have to show like a demo, a prototype, and this and that, and if they miss those specific stretch goals, well, do you want to sink more money into that studio specifically if they miss those stretch goals entirely? That's my curiosity. If they miss those things for that specific game, maybe the game just wasn't coming out the way how it needed to be. That could also be another probability, you know. I hope not, because that is what happened to the Blade movie. Well, only problem is like who was in that studio, you know, who was the leadership and who were the people behind that entire project itself. You know, the only way we could find out is get the hands on the information to look into it.
Are very much still coming, enough to get Xbox's spending to a level where Sharma and Nadella can actually be happy about things. So to summarize things so far, there's a bunch of studios they no longer want, and it seems to be the case that if those studios can't secure external funding to basically allow them to sort of buy themselves out, that Microsoft's just going to shut them.
Besides, you did say this, dubstep. Console players don't play new games. They only PC players play new games. So I bet you most of the sales was not met to expectation or so on PC. So, because we all know, like, console players just only play the same games, you know? Like the new same game IPs. That's what they mostly do. At least we're getting the TMNT, The Last Ronin.
Down. And of course, for the likes of, say, Ninja Theory, it can be a little bit tricky whenever, well, Xbox owns the Hellblade IP. And that means that even if those companies are able to get their own independence back, they'll probably have to cut loads of costs, axe loads of people, and they could have issues with access to IP. But then there's people who are no longer at risk of being laid off because they were encouraged to jump rather than wait to be pushed. Earlier on this year, you see, Microsoft offered their first ever voluntary retirement program for senior staff. It targeted 7% of their US workforce. And the logic here is really simple. Senior leadership costs more in both salaries and compensation. Plus, if they allow themselves to be bought out, it is better press than, of course, it being a layoff. What we've now learned, as spotted by Destin Legary, is Xbox senior leadership at studios like Mojang are now being offered to take similar terms and are actually taking them. And I don't think anyone can blame them for doing that. They'll get a decent enough deal as they go out the door, and it'll all happen in a way where they've got this crazy little thing called security and predictability in their circumstances, which is at least one of the benefits of going of your own accord and taking up one of these deals. Though while that's good for them, it's almost certainly really quite bad for us, because losing all of that experience and leadership is going to hurt Xbox as it plans whatever comes next, which I think is going to be building a new future out of the rubble of the old future that the previous bunch were trying to sell us on. Take a look at this image. It's a fun image. It's what Xbox looked like 4 years ago. 30 plus studios, all making games of every scale, and many studios, of course, with multiple teams inside them. Crazy stuff. But then Microsoft demanded the whole division hit a 30% profit margin, according to many reports, and in addition to that, having quarterly cost reduction targets.
Oh no, we'll never get the new DMC game. Oh my god, I feel so saddened. We'll never get a sequel for that DMC game. Wow, I feel very sad right now. Oh no. Oh no. No. But I wanted a sequel to that DMC game, you know?
Studios like Toys for Bob or Tango Gameworks were released and did end up being able to survive. There's been great news with Toys for Bob. We're getting Spyro back, which is pretty sick. As for Tango Gameworks, well, I don't think anyone really likes Krafton, who are the bunch that acquired them, but still, I'd say we all wish them the best.
True.
Other studios, though, like The Initiative, were closed down. As we know, thousands of people were laid off. Their overall issue was that games took ages to release, but Game Pass profits and Activision Blizzard were basically there to subsidize the rest of the business. That's stuff that we know from...
No, we're not talking about DMC 6. We're talking about the other DMC game. If you guys remember the other DMC game. Dubstep, what is the name of that title for that DMC game? They'll know once you say the name.
Sharma herself. And I suppose you could say that that is sort of the platonic ideal of what a big raft of studios should give you as a business. I mean, maybe the highest form of the idea is you have all these studios and they just do nothing but non-stop bangers, but that's not how any of this ever works. The whole point of the system that had been built is that success would work in everyone's favor and that losses would get soaked up. And if that didn't work out, it was fine. Game Pass was making loads of money, and Call of Duty makes all the money in the world. Just that there's the small thing of Game Pass's price hike absolutely backfiring, and 2025's Call of Duty also absolutely backfiring. That's kind of weird. The first year since that big, studios image where the pipeline was starting to flow as we saw AA, AAA, and indie scale games all get released in this constant stream, that was all going on.
No,
and 2026 onwards would have been the same. I mean, just look at the Xbox showcase. But obviously, their plans are now very different indeed. Studios like Double Fine, Compulsion, and Ninja Theory weren't meant to make huge AAA franchises. They never did that sort of thing. But now, the impression is that Xbox rather talk to third parties than make those games in-house. Paying for a publishing deal is, of course, likely cheaper than just paying people's salaries directly yourself.
Oh, that's interesting. That makes sense in my personal opinion.
Especially because, hey, if it's a publishing deal that doesn't work out, that's fine. Just move on to the next thing. You're not caught holding a studio-shaped bag. So
they'd rather talk to a third-person studio or so to work on some of these indie games, and then they can just publish them. Outsourcing is the way to go, pretty much, because they don't want to be able to. They don't want to pay a dead studio, to be frankly honest. If they're not working on anything, at the end of the day, it feels like it's such a risk at that point. Plus, also at the same time, like I said before, Console players just don't play new games. You said it yourself. You told me that like console players just don't play new games. Only PC players do. Granted, I was the few minority that I do play, new games, of course, but it's still kind of like pretty ironic though to see, to see that it's only PC players.
What does Xbox want to make then? Well, Xbox wants to make the, quote, industry-defining franchises that Asher talked about. Now, Windows Central's reporting suggests that this basically means more Fallout, sooner Fallout as well.
I don't want more Fallout games. Give me the fucking new Skyrim game that you guys, like, literally, honestly, like, you guys announced it so many years ago. I don't want a new Fallout game. God, lordy lord, honestly. Yeah, I get it. I can like customize it and make it into an anime, but like into an anime style. But I don't want another Fallout game. We've had so many goddamn well, mostly the advertisement for that one MMO game anyways, but like get ready, chat, we're gonna be here for a long time with Fallout, number 8.
Of course, all in time to capitalize on the show's success, but we don't just have their reporting. The information backed that up and then said that the demands were going further, that it would mean Halo, Elder Scrolls, and more. So you can basically see the way the tide's turning here. Big franchises, and specifically the big franchises that are already proven things. That's what'll get you a budget in the new Xbox era. And it's the same thing.
But my question is, what the hell happened to fucking Elder Scrolls then? Has that been scrapped or something? I'm like, when are we gonna get our Elder Scrolls game? The last Fallout that was good, I enjoyed, was Vegas and 4.
Happened to
I haven't played a single Fallout game.
EA, Take-Two, and Ubisoft, who basically can't really take risks or give you new games. They will only give you the games that you'll recognize. And I think the funniest thing is that if this was all a plan cooked up by Bobby Kotick, it would sort of be indistinguishable, and it would be exactly the sort of thing that he applied to Activision through all of those years. And of course, while he pissed off loads of us along the way, made a shitload of money for the company, didn't he?
That is true.
One thing I want you to understand from this video is that everything we've covered here is just the precursor to far wider cuts. Even Xbox's profitable, more tenured studios could still see layoffs. Everything reshuffled around leadership's new plans. Plus, of course, senior staff walking out the door for early retirement, taking all of their lovely hard-earned experience with them. And all of that is a damning abdication of responsibility from Xbox's new leadership after
if they get rid of the old cooks and everything like that, it feels like they're not going to give that knowledge to the younger ones, and then, well, Lord behold, Modern Warfare slop. I'll play the beta for this game, but I don't have high hopes for this game, though.
Decade of buying up developers. It's that sort of thing. Are they holding themselves responsible for the actions of past leadership? On a personal level, probably not. Asher probably sees herself as coming in and cleaning up someone else's mess. That will, of course, be very little comfort to anyone who finds themselves on the bad end of these changes. And of course, for players, on top of all this stuff, it's
because they live in California. That's the reason why. I'm like, most of these studios live in California because it's so expensive over there. Like I said, we did the research. Literally one developer, just one developer, right? Not a specialist, not a senior position or anything like that. One specific developer is equivalent to 3 to 4 developers in the Eastern Asian market. So, I can just imagine how many developers you can get if it's a senior level staff, You can probably get someone in the senior staff side on the Eastern Asian side for this,
Breach of trust. Though it's not the first time Xbox has done that. But previously, there's always been a specter of Microsoft in the background. It had always been the idea that Phil Spencer and co., while they were failing, they were sort of being forced into action by Nadella and the C-suite. There are people who could review a game and absolutely love the game, but still have to cut the team whenever the demand came from on top. Under the new leadership, well, with all their claims of latitude from Nadella and their appeals for responsible development, I think it's far harder to give them the same grace whenever they showed us a game 1 week and then closed the studio that made the bloody thing just 1 week later. This is a developing story. It will develop, so stay tuned to the channel. There's a lot of rough stuff happening in the industry. A lot of that's also happening in the funding space. I think you guys can see with this video how, yeah, it's the funding situation, the money situation drives so much of this. And while that's one reason you should check...
There's like multiple factors at the end of the day, but that is part of the factor. Like I always say specifically, it's not the solely cost of just because Cali is expensive and everything like that. That's the only thing, right? There are other things in general, because we are going to get the whole video game crash and everything like that. Everything development has gone through the roof or so, bloated fucking budgets or so. And this also proves as well that those specific studios were not meant to have that much money or so to be invested in for them to make games. They were supposed to have a more smaller budget. I'm like, I would be pissed off too, because apparently rumor has it that what is it? The Midnight game or so, the Sons of Midnight or whatever it's called, whatever that specific game is called. Apparently, it had 100 million, right, of investment, but only got 500K in like basically return profit. Apparently, rumor has it. Who knows how true that is, right? Take it as a grain of salt. But like, I wouldn't be surprised if that's actually is true. You know, South of Midnight. There you go. That's the name of the game. Yeah, South of Midnight. So, yeah, I'm like, it's kind of a little bit crazy to see that, like, you know, just only that much was returned in profit wise. That is like deep in the red, to be honest. I'm like, would I start giving like that even failed even poorly than normal standards of like failure. So, but yeah, like I said, I'm not surprised. You know, the best way we can say it is okay, rip bozo, I guess. You know, so should have actually made a game for gamers. And plus also apparently the what is it, the CEO, I think it's the CEO of that studio is also hating on gamers and everything like that. The former CEO was too hands-free, not really inspecting their games on the Sony side. They got too much of an iron grip. Yeah, the problem is like, because if I remember correctly, because earlier in the former CEO, they literally wanted to be hands off, right? So the studios can have creative will and they can do whatever they want. But that was too lenient, and the studios kind of got away with a lot of things in general. Well, you know, like as you said yourself, on the Sony side, they fucking have that shit as an iron fucking fist over there with those studios. So like I said, it kind of really depends like what you want specifically when it comes to like, you know, I'm hoping at least with this might turn the tide to Xbox. It might actually kick the shit out of Sony to finally get them humbled up at least a little bit, but we will see. Because at the end of the day, right, we're living in this day and age that the PC marketplace is not to be ignored anymore. So if they want the return profitability, they need to definitely buckle up and make those actual games for, you know, for the player base. Because at the end of the day, the majority of the player base is guys. And if you're not catering to the guys, making these weird, artsy, weird like projects or so that are putting way too much funding into them, that shouldn't have this much funding to begin with, then, well, what do you expect at the end of the day? So that's why I disagree with the Young Yeah video. I just don't understand why are we like trying to feel sorry for these people when they literally fucked up on the product, you know? Like they literally messed up on the product in general. So like, why are we like saying like, oh no, we should feel bad, you know? The problem is like they also hired, you know, way too many during the 2019, 2020 era of the pandemic, because everyone was indoors and they saw sales go up on video games. So they wanted to hire more people to, you know, to make more video games to sell. But that also shot you in the foot completely too later down the line, because the projects take between like, what is it, like, depending on the game itself, it takes you 5, 6, 7 years to make video games. And that's kind of like basically it. So yeah, but the problem is like most of those games that were done or so have been in development for even longer, for like 8 to 9, maybe 7 years, instead of like the usual normal dev time, instead of like, depending on the game in general, right? But like, well, rip bozo, I guess, you know? Put the fries in the bag, studios, put the fries in the bag. It's over. It's Jover for these studios. We might be getting some good games now, perhaps, maybe. They really damage a lot of things. Were good, but who knows about the future? I think it's gonna go into a better form of light because she is trying to clean up basically what happened to the last CEO. You know, she's trying to clean up house right now. She's doing some spring cleaning and getting rid of some shit that doesn't need to be there. You know, because at the end of the day, right? Xbox is not a charity. It's a business at the end of the day. You need to be cutthroat in a business and you have to make money. So, like I said, I have my it seems like she's actually doing some good things because she did actually lower the price of the actual Xbox Game Pass. Like she started reversing a lot of things in general from what, Phil Spencer messed up on, But we'll see what happens at the end of the day. We still have to wait at least for like I'd say about like maybe like 2 years down the line to see how she does as CEO for Xbox and see how the ecosystem is going to become later down the line. Sometimes you gotta cut stuff to make some new ones. Exactly. I'm like they weren't supposed to have that much of a money at the end of the day. So, but all we can do is just wait. I'd say about like 2 to 3 years. We'll see what happens in due time when it comes to some of these games. Let's see about Gears of War. E-Day sells well or half. I'd be curious to see how it's going to be for Gears of War. But all we can do is just wait at the end of the day. Hopefully D3. Never. We're never getting a D3. Let it go. uh, something. Can't wait. Hopefully Xbox turns it around at least and comes back as a heavy competitor for some